Ooh, what up, party people? Just seems that we get to have a lot more fun conversations, which is great. And yeah, you guys get to hear Zhao's sweet voice, his beautiful voice. So before I bring him up here, I'm really excited to start doing some of these events, essentially exclusively within the tribe server. Of course, as Zhao starts scaling out, especially in the month of August, you're going to see the jungle team be a lot more active on Twitter, and of course, we'll be supporting them. And what's really exciting is that Zhao's been someone I've been working closely with on his project for 3-4 months now, and we've seen just so many cool things. He's been really picking up a lot of knowledge, and he's really been embracing Web3. And he's also has Web3 experience even prior to Jungle, which is really great. And what's amazing about what we're doing here at Tribe is that we're of course trying to give you guys more access, more opportunity to everything else that's happening in the space. And one of the best ways to do that is us actually building in those bridges for new partners who are coming in, to the trenches and hopefully be able to launch with a lot of our guidance, but also what's more valuable is our community with all of you, our community with all of our diamonds, our community of all of our soul members. We have such a strong loyalty factor here that I think it's going to be really exciting to be able to share that each and every one with you. So today we're going to have Zhao, and we're just going to have a casual conversation to kind of just learn about, why he's in Web3, what he's up to, what his team's up to. I have the privilege because I already know a lot behind the scenes. I even have the game. I play the game actually quite often here. It's always fun. Little FPS loops, which will be pretty cool. And then hopefully it'll give all of you guys an opportunity to see why we're also equally bullish on Jungle. It's not just the fact that they meet all these different standards that are always great, but what you'll hear as well is the passion and more importantly the vision of what they're trying to do by again taking on a lot of risk and building out a game prior to mint. I think this is a really, really positive thing to see in Web3. And this is a game that will actually be native on mobile, which will be really exciting too. So without further ado, let's bring up our boy Joao, and we'll have some fun here.
GM, how's it going, man?
Hey, what's good, Joao? How you doing, man?
Good. Excited to be here and excited to be part of the community and seeing all the memes already popping up here between the jungle and tribe community together.
Amazing, man. I love it. They've really wanted me to, they love getting access to the list, but they get even more excited to potentially be a part of this here as well. So watch out, Joe. It looks like we're getting a little bit of echo from your side.
Yeah, let me
Don't
check.
know. You might just need to like mute and unmute when you're talking. It might need to help, or you might want to use some headphones. All right, no worries. But yeah, Zhao, I mean, I know you've been working really hard. Maybe it'd be really good for you to start with a quick intro on what you're building, what Jungle is, and what kind of brought the idea to try something out in Web3 to just give a little bit of context for those who are meeting you for the first time.
Yeah, for sure. And let me know how the audio issue kind of gets resolved. But yeah, so to kick things off, so I originally started my career on the venture side. I did that for a few years in a fund out of Europe that had a very heavy mobile gaming pedigree with some veterans from the industry that were part of King in the early days and helped scale Candy Crush, right? So that was my first exposure to the mobile gaming industry, right? And obviously, since I was always like a player since I was a kid, I was already familiar with it as a consumer and kind of personally, as something that I grew up with. But to just see the scale of the industry, and particularly on the mobile side, right? When I joined in the late 2010s, that was really fascinating for me, right? And that clicked on a bunch of levels, right? It was finally something that connected this personal hobby and this personal passion with something that I saw a lot of opportunity and upside with, right? So from there, I started meeting with founders. I started researching the industry and getting essentially the lay of the land, right? Building a mental model for the future of gaming, right? And particularly, I think you relate to this, Nick. At the time, mobile was near an innovation plateau, right? Mobile has always been kind of like an industry that punishes taking risks, right? It follows this formula of N plus one, right? You always look at what's been proven, what's been done, and you do one extra step, but you don't go too far off, right? And creatively, that was very limiting for me. I think it was something that I realized, look, this is the biggest pie here. This is where a lot of the growth and the opportunity is, but creatively it doesn't get my juices flowing, right? So the more I started building a good kind of like mental model of it, the more I started seeing that it wasn't something interesting to be involved in just on the baseline like of mobile free to play. But that changed for me, and that excitement kind of came back in early 2021 when I started looking into sort of the intersection of gaming and Web3, right? And this was prior to Axie. You had a lot of builders already sort of active in the space, but it hadn't hit the inflection point that we kind of sort of all went through in like summer of 2021, right? But in that kind of like niche, specifically talking with founders, I saw the potential of a new business model, right? I saw a lot of builders that were taking way more creative risk and doing something different, and that was something that appealed to me. So what I did was I started being way more active in the space. Initially, as a sort of NFT degen and trader, I started just understanding the technology, being part of the communities, helping out different projects, right? Getting immersed at the very kind of like user level, right? To just build that kind of like skill set and understanding. And that started growing with me, right? I started seeing like the possibility of new models for gaming, new kind of like internet native communities popping up, and kind of a whole new horizon, a whole new design space that was opening up. So when I kind of fully understood what was happening there, I decided to make the leap, and I found myself in another gaming company called Wildlife Studios that was also excited to explore the future of that space, right? So I joined Wildlife in 2022, and I was operating with them as part of their Web3 sort of team and research unit. And that was when I made the transition into building in the space, right? But I realized very quickly in that experience all of the kind of operational pain points and bottlenecks of working within the constraint of a huge mobile gaming publisher that had its core business in free to play, right? And was never gonna dedicate all of its resources into a market that had a lot of potential, but it was still very early on in its development sort of journey and commercial kind of readiness, right? And that was the trigger for me to then jump and start my own project in the space that later became Jungle, right? Particularly realizing that you had to go all in, right? When a new platform shift arises, it is not the builders of the last generation that figure it out and really build natively to that system. It is usually new companies, new publisher, new thinkers in the space that get it and are able to capitalize on that opportunity, right? So this is where Junko kind of originates from that uh, context of knowing the venture side of the industry, knowing then the established kind of like gaming companies and incumbents in the space, and then realizing that there is a wide space here to navigate in between the incumbents and the upstarts of Web3 gaming. And we can get more into that later, and particularly like how we differ in our approach versus other Web3 gaming companies. But that was the origin story. And now I'm very excited to be here and, still in the first year of building Jungle, but already, proving out some of the thinking live with the community and also with our partners like Tribe.
Awesome, man. And I think that's where it's pretty exciting. I love hearing your background. I love also just how thoughtful you are with your introduction and your thinking. You have very clear mental models. You have very clear analysis of the market. you kind of understand, strengths, weaknesses. You've probably done enough SWOT analysis in your life to be able to, evaluate any of these market conditions as well. And I think that's really bullish, right? Because you want operators that have been operators, have evaluated other, businesses that have been operators themselves. And then more importantly, it's also taking all that knowledge to be then native to Web3. And that's the one thing I've been seeing with you as well do is just trying to really spend a lot of time on working with a lot of these other individuals and learn and consume information. I mean, we were even in person last week when we met here in Paris, and you were always constantly connecting with different founders, different builders, and analyzing. And I think that's like a really bullish element here as well. Oh, sorry, Zhao, you probably need to mute yourself. You're still getting feedback here as well. So, as we kind of move to the next level here, what I'm really excited about now is kind of this approach from everything we took from mobile gaming, right? And you kind of know that gaming is running into a lot of other issues. And it seems that Web3 could be an interesting edge into that market, right? Or a vector of attack to that market. Walk me through your thinking there as well for Jungle, right? Like, why do you think that, mobile gaming in Web3 is a good fit? But more importantly, why do you think Web3 can be a disruptor to that space as well, based off what you've seen play out over the last few years?
Yeah, for sure. And just prior to getting into mobile, I think I segment this market in essentially two buckets of builders, right? And I'll post here in the chat to kind of like make it clear. But it's essentially those that get it, but don't know what they're doing, right? This is like the upstarts bucket, like Web3 natives that fundamentally understand the space, but don't know what they're doing in terms of game development. And then the ones that don't get it but know what they're doing, right? Which is the reverse, which is game developers that come into the space know how to do game dev, but completely miss the point of how Web3 operates and how these users are here for almost like different reasons, right? So I think that that's kind of part of um, the the area where we click as well, right? Just understanding kind of like what changes from like a business model perspective, but also from a design perspective when you shift from mobile into Web3. But yeah, sure. So just to take your question on mobile, why are we positioned on mobile? Why do we think it's such sort of an exciting space to be in, particularly for Web3 gaming, right? The high level here is essentially that this is the only frontier for mass adoption possible, right? If you sort of break gaming down by platforms, right? Very quickly you realize that most of the volume is in mobile, and this is where Web3 gaming found product market fit in the last cycle in 2021, right? It was a lot of emerging markets, right, that were mobile um, mobile first, or in some cases mobile only, right? Coming to these games. It was not in the console business. It was not on desktop with AAA, right? There is no signal there for us in terms of actual player demand from those buckets, motivating builders to ship product there for those audiences, right? So I think that that's one sort of like base level insight that is maybe fairly obvious, but I think a lot of the market maybe misses. The other point here is just um, the maybe market maturity or kind of like stage of mobile today, right? So mobile has always been kind of a numbers game, right? I think the quote here that the best kind of like encapsulates this is when quantity becomes a quality all its own, right? When we're talking about billions of users globally, that has a very different effect on how you build for that platform, what are the specs you need to be taken into account, and how your distribution strategy needs to be built for scale, right? And so this is where mobile today is at, which is a lot of that numbers game has been played out. We're near saturation on content, and particularly with the platforms implementing more kind of privacy-oriented changes, it is very hard now to actually distribute on mobile, right? So the biggest thing that you had going for the platform, the sheer scale of it, is now working against it, right? And so you have this fight for attention where your tools don't get you the same mileage as they did before, right? And this is where kind of Web3 kind of neatly slots in, right? You finally have a whole new audience that you can tap into, that you have full transparency on chain, and that has some of the biggest agglomeration of whales from anywhere, right? And so mobile is also premised on this like power law, where you're acquiring millions of users to really find your power users, your whales that are going to drive the business forward. And now with the privacy challenge, making it so that you can't actually know whether you're acquiring those whales. You have this whole new side here of the equation in Web3 where you know exactly which users are whales and how big they're whales, right? And there's also the point here just of the magnitude, right? Like if you were to quantify whales on a spectrum, right? I think the typical whale in mobile in Web2 is, I guess, anywhere in the thousands, right? Is already a qualifier for a mobile game whale. In Web3, we're talking about orders of magnitude potentially higher, right? Dozens, hundreds of thousands, potentially millions in the wallets of these users, looking for quality projects, looking for interesting opportunities and communities to be a part of, right? So we're just talking about giga whales that don't have access to the same level of entertainment and content that you see on mobile, right? So I guess that's some of the lenses that I bring into the mobile space and why now it's like particularly ripe for disruption and why like Web3 is particularly like an interesting distribution wedge there.
Yeah, I really love that. Oh, sorry, you might want to mute Azelle. And yeah, perfect. And I love that kind of perspective. Yeah, I think this is what most people don't understand. Is that mobile advantages have totally changed in this market. And because of that, right, it requires a new vector of attack, right? All these mobile game companies are now fully sidelined, right? And Joao and I actually both worked at a similar company. I was a consultant; he was an employee there, where I was consulting, advising the team at Wildlife. And same thing. These were guys who were massive giants in the the early wave of mobile gaming, but really kind of ran into some uphill battles as they tried to get to the next evolution. Mainly because the growth game changed, right? LTV changed, user acquisition changed, all these things became elements that you had to really adapt, and it's been hard for the entire market. And really mobile's looking for just generally new answers, mainly because nothing's really been working historically in this market as well too. So this is kind of why I'm pretty excited about the opportunity of where mobile can be a disruptor factor, because mobile still has the distribution lead, right? Like if we already look at the amount of revenue being generated, right? Mobile generates the 50% of all gaming revenue right now, right? And then if we're looking at it on a per user basis, right, or number of unique users, there's no platform that comes close to mobile. Mobile's in the billions of users, right? Which is a crazy number to say out loud. So this is kind of the amazing thing about why I do believe the mobile platform, if I were doing anything in Web3 gaming today, right, mobile needs to be the promised land you're optimizing for. And that seems like very key on your end. But maybe before we go more into the game vision here, which I think is really exciting, it might be helpful to we could do all the little like leverage here of talking about your team, your fundraising might be really cool here to maybe chat a little bit about. Maybe give us a little high level overview of like what led to you raising your seed round and the investors you brought in, and then separately behind that, maybe give us a little high level overview of how you run your team, because that's actually been one of my favorite parts. You're probably like one of the most capital efficient founders I've seen at this stage. And it's very easy to get irresponsible when you get like a massive seed round, because you did raise a really large seed round by pretty much every conventional standard. But you're still sticking to a very thoughtful, lean approach, especially in this bear market, which I think is really healthy. So maybe if you could give the crowd a little bit of an understanding of, what was the round you raised, why were the investors you chose brought in, and then maybe talk about the team. I think that'd be a great next step.
Yeah, for sure. And just one other comment on the mobile to Web3 kind of difference, right? I think you see it right here in this chat, right? The fact that pre-launch, we are here in a space with 300 people keen to learn more about the project. I mean, this is unimaginable in mobile free-to-play, right? The level of attention and kind of excitement that has built up over the last few months around Jungle is just unparalleled, right? When you go to any marketer in mobile free-to-play and you say, look, we already have thousands of users across Twitter and Discord. They're with us on a daily basis making content about the game, making memes about the characters, right? Excited for what we're building. I mean, that's insane, right? Like, they're used to a model where like every user is an acquired user because you show them an ad on like a platform, right? And therefore they converted because it looked interesting, right? The level of engagement that we see and kind of like bottoms up sort of sheer energy is just like unheard of. So I think it starts already showing kind of some of the differences here of the traditional free-to-play playbook versus really building natively in Web3. But let me shift back to your question. So when we started Jungle, it was a particularly interesting period in the market, right? That this was like Q4 2022, right? So we started pitching the first kind of like investors around September, October period, right? And very fast, we got a lot of traction because of kind of just how different we were approaching the market versus your typical Web3 gaming company starting from zero, right? But it happened in a period where FTX shortly blew up, right? So it was definitely a lot of like chaos. Um, in the context of the raise. But independent of that, we ended up closing a very strong seed round. So we raised just over six. We initially started with 5 mil, but got oversubscribed, and we were at some point nearing just over 8 mil in commits, but decided to not dilute too much at that stage, and particularly with all of the mess coming out of the FTX situation, we decided to close fast and move on to building, right? So we wrapped all of that process by by late um, by late 2022 in December, and we chose to go with um, Bitcraft and Framework as the lead investors, with a bunch of other kind of Web3 gaming funds invested as part of that round, right? So Delphi Digital, 32-Bit, Monoceros, a bunch of other really good folks that we got lucky to meet as part of the process, right? So I think we have essentially one of the best kept tables in the market. I think the pedigree there with Bitcraft being sort of one of the strongest gaming investors in the market, both across kind of Web3 and traditional gaming, right? And also Framework being one of the sort of tier one crypto investors from this market. So we're very happy with the cap table. We closed in December, and then we started a company in January, right? And then this sort of transitions into or kind of like capital allocation or like resource management kind of like point of view, right? I think it's particularly difficult to build a Web3 gaming company or just a gaming company today in the West, right? Just the inflated salaries and kind of competition for talent makes it really difficult for you to have a lean team and be able to scale out that talent, right? So in the US and in Europe, I mean, I think it's really kind of tilted against founders, right? You're having to compete in a really select pool of talent, and you're having to like essentially go into bid wars, right? And we made a very kind of conscious decision that we wanted to build most of the team out of Latam, and particularly Brazil, as we were native to that market, and we saw the potential of being better at finding good talent, closing talent, and essentially converting, right? All the while, like not compromising on quality, but really optimizing the cost structure, right? So, I mean, when I talk to the funds involved here, I think we have one of the leanest um, operational capital like in the industry for sure. And it's not like we're moving any slower or we're compromising quality because of that, right? So I think it's just hunting very much like, the thinking and going into Web3. I think it's just hunting in a different pool, right? And you end up getting better risk reward. So yeah, at this point, we're now, I think, we're gonna close on 15 people full time by end of this month. So hopefully we can close the next person in the next few days here. And we have a bunch of other people involved in the project that are not full time as either contractors, consultants, freelancers. So all in all, I think it's between 20 and 30 people, most of which is allocated towards the game. And that's as it should be as a game developer. And a very small part of the team, like myself and a few of the other people that you see on the jungle server, are more focused on sort of Web3, the community, and everything we're doing there.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think that's where I think it's just an awesome start when we're looking at the foundation of a business in this market and realizing, right, that, hey, you brought in a very healthy cap table, a very healthy around the capital. And then more importantly, you're continuing to maintain a long tail burn, I'm sorry, a long tail runway because you're not being overindulgent with your burn rate, which is like one of the smartest things you can do as any founder, but even more, relevant to a founder that's dealing with the bear market like Web3, right? And this is where it gets really interesting now. And the reason why, both of us kind of connect with one another is because the goal is now to sequence a strategy that is going to lead to, this kind of promised land outcome to disrupt the opportunity around mobile. And I think, this is where I get excited because, you are already thinking through stuff like small supply and free mint, which I think is also really bullish here in this kind of market, because especially when we look at, ETH, and like, to be very honest, ETH is kind of crumbling in a lot of ways. I think the best thing that you can do now is build this depth of loyalty, right? And again, this is like technically one of your first audio events you've done. And the fact that you could get 330, and probably by the end of this, 350 unique people to be listening in just a Discord server, right? That's effectively over 50, 35 to 50% of the effective supply. Not saying everyone here is getting a whitelist by any means, but it's a very interesting ratio problem to be able to solve for. So, like Joao, as you get ready for the Web3 side of it, and I know we're going to be amplifying your marketing here in the month of August, and I know you're still finding the right time zone and timeline here, time window here to launch. Walk us through, what do you think are the hardest challenges right now of being a Web3 founder that has kind of surprised you in your journey, right? Because again, you're still very early in this, but I'm sure you're already feeling some of those hurdles, some of those questions. Just kind of curious, man, what has been the hardest thing about being a Web3 founder thus far for you?
Yeah, for sure. And I think part of my answer here is in the beginning of your question, which is just navigating time, right? A lot of this market is premised on cycle times that have insane volatility, right? The mania that we kind of all felt and experienced in 2021 is a very different reality than we have today, right? So I think the point here is really there isn't a silver bullet that solves this market from a design perspective, from a distribution perspective, from an adoption perspective, right? You need to be building very close and watching the market as a participant and knowing like what works at any given time, right? So to a large extent, it's just playing to the meta, right? And the meta is constantly shifting. So you need to be obsessed about being a student of this market, joining in as you see new kind of like potential models arise, understanding the trade-offs, understanding the dynamics involved, and being able to commit when you're ready to push for the pedal on the gas, right? I think a lot of the failures of this market is just premised on execution timing, right? Projects like launching way too early, prior to game being done, right? Not being able to sustain the attention, right? Essentially, burning a lot of capital at the wrong time, right? So though we've opened the community, we've been on this steady holding pattern because we want to be able to launch at a moment that like we're able to follow up with the game right away, right? So we want to be able to have that fastest kind of like operation in the market. And as soon as, we give you guys a date that we're minting, like the game is ready to go, right? And then it will just be ready to ship and for you all to experience it. Um, so that there isn't a secret formula for it. I think a lot of it just comes down to sort of gut instinct and the feel for the market, being a market participant on a day-to-day basis, right? And from being in these kind of like forums like Tribe, the sentiment, right? I think we can all kind of arrive at a consensus here that we're, pretty close to like Max Payne territory, which is like very bearish but very bullish in the sense that usually when you get that feeling, you're reaching bottom, right? So I'm excited to be kind of tracking the market over the next 3 months or quarter to find the right timing for us. But there isn't any science to this, and I think this is something that a lot of sort of projects will just miss, right? Not being able to navigate the market and sort of honing down in a vision that they potentially developed, in a bull market that just isn't tracking to reality anymore, right? So I think that's where like a lot of the challenges. The other sort of side of the equation here, I was listening to a space that Gabe at Lemon Break did, and I think a lot of it that he's feeling and articulating is very true to sort of founders operating in the space, which is the sheer user member player pressure that comes from building in public. Um, when a lot of these projects were never used to this and are now having to deal with this like psychological burden on top of actually building a company, building a community, and building a game, right? I think for us, the way I've kind of dealt with it personally is just having fun with it. You know, I I love the memes that come out of the space. I think a lot of the reason why I joined in 2021 or late 2020 was the sheer like new culture, internet native, the memes that were coming out of the space were just like on a whole new level of fun, right? So I take it on a good spirit. We haven't seen almost any FUD in the timeline, which is good so far. But whenever there is any kind of like doubts or challenge, I try to have fun with it, and that's kind of been my approach to the space. Keep it light, keep it fun, and yeah, you need to be able to be operating and building, and a lot of that is down to psychological game, right? Of like just motivating yourself and having fun with the process.
Yeah, and I think that's the important thing, man. Like, keeping it light and fun when everything else is quite tough in this market is just a nice way to keep your sanity. Because same thing, for me, we try to avoid, some of these kind of more aggressive, negative, shitting on conversations. Don't get me wrong. I do have some hard statements when I do feel the market's wronged us. But, I think in the end, right, it's trying to pull the positivity out and more of the fun out here when you can, right? And that's kind of the important thing as a founder. And, again, just being in the trenches, it's quite true what you noted, right, in regard to these challenges, these challenges of time, right? It's a huge thing that we're looking at, right? When will this market not keep rugging itself, right? That's like unfortunately the question that we all ask, right? Because I mean, we were just talking about, like I think Genkai from CyberCons is going to have a very tough day tomorrow. And that's going to be bad for the overall market. We already saw Garbage Friends have a tough time. We saw Ether have a very tough time. We saw Azuki had a very tough time. The Gods is now slipping because it looks like it might be delayed. It's a lot. It's a tough problem for not only new projects, but way way harder projects as well too, right? Or sorry, way larger projects as well, or established tier one projects in a lot of people's eyes. So this is kind of where it gets interesting now. Like, how do we navigate this as founders? And then it's also interesting because Gabe has taken a very different approach, right? He was first trying to be the savior of the market, about trying to get everyone to believe free, free, free. And then the problem was is that he wasn't able to deliver on the timeline that most people were expecting, and he effectively created his own almost factory Ponzi scheme of multiple assets. and there was really nothing there at the end of that funnel, right? That then price started to drop, and the sentiment of those users went downhill relatively quickly. And it's interesting because don't get me wrong, there's a lot of stuff that he says is very true, but it's also interesting on the way that he's executed. It just seems really poor, right? And this is the one thing why I really liked our conversations where we've been talking about, because like Zhao knows I'm that guy who's like always trying to keep him like we should mint soon, right? Like to a certain extent, right? Or mint in healthy ways. But like Zhao knows, right? The biggest key is that when he does mint and when he does announce date, it's you knowing that game ready, a game ready within 30 days post mint, right? That's what he's really aiming for, which I think is such a bullish thing to have in this marketplace right now, right? And that's what a lot of people don't understand here at the moment right now, is that very few people come in with that sentiment and that logic. And we've seen a lot of people say they have a game, but like I'm saying with Joao, like I mean, dude, I've had this build for what, 2.5 months now. Zhao's probably been playing this build for 4 months, 5 months now, right? Since pretty much the early days of this as well. And it is a very interesting and fun loop. But I think what's even more special is that it'll be there when we mint, right? Or it'll be there within that first post mint experience, which I think changes everything about this market in a very healthy way. Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, just jumping in. It's already there, right? Like I think this is the bullish thing to kind of clarify. Like the game is ready. It's just in the process of becoming better and better as we refine the design, test it with players, and make it the best version possible to ship to you guys, right? So this is also going back to kind of like my point of like, why starting in this market from the venture landscape was particularly interesting, is that I saw that a lot of these projects in gaming would die before even shipping, right? The vast majority can't get to the end of the development journey, right? They start with this very kind of like ambitious, creative vision. They're gonna make, design breakthroughs all over the spectrum. By year two, the whole team is burned out. They can barely articulate why what they started with and how they've drifted, right? So for us, it's very important that like execution is not even a question, right? That's a given. And so our game is there. It's just a question now of like how can we make it better in this time period so that when we ship, it is the best Web3 gaming on mobile that you guys have ever played, right? That's kind of the bar that we're setting out to achieve. And that only is the start of the process, right? To be able to ship a game and get you, at some point beyond most Web3 gaming projects in the market. But then it's really a question of how can you scale this out? How can you monetize a player base? How can you involve the community in a meaningful way, right? These are the questions where we're thinking a lot about because, like I said, we started with a much better baseline, right? That we didn't have to worry, can we ship or not? We knew that we had a killer team. We knew that the game was a solid foundation to build on, and we started executing on top of that foundation.
Yeah, and that's exactly why it's so bullish here, right? And like I said, we've been legitimately playing it. I've been on play tests with Zhao and other people that they've already recruited or partners that they know in their network that have been experts in the shooter game category as well. And that's where it's exciting because Zhao's right. The core loop is done, right? And the core product experience is done. It's got multiple weapons, multiple characters, multiple upgrades, multiple levels, right? And that leads to a sentiment of like, oh wow, this just now needs that last wave of polish as you get to it with bug fixing and all the different outliers and all the different devices. And that's really where Zhao's now in the trenches, and very few people understand that, right? No one really understands that. And that's why I love having these conversations to start here within Tribe, because it's also being able to give you guys that little bit of alpha of understanding where that's going. But maybe Zhao, if you have a moment, I'm just curious what you're willing to share or describe around the product. I think would be interesting here, and kind of what the lens is on how you're designing for a shooter in this market, or how you want to categorize that or characterize that. I'd love to just hear how you'd want to like introduce that product experience to our community here thus far.
For sure. And let me do a quick alpha leak here of something that we were gonna post, but I ended up holding back. I'll drop it in the chat to the point of, the game being ready and the characters. I kind of teased a concept art last week, but let me show you like what the actual character looks like uh, painted out. And this character is already in game. So there you go. Hopefully that gets the yeah, seeing the fire emojis here. Nice. But yeah, let's talk about the game. So the game is a mobile shooter, as you guys can kind of tell. It is a mobile shooter focused on a tactical space, right? So very much in between kind of like the Valorant sort of landscape is where we kind of like drew a lot of inspiration and building, right? There's also a hero shooter that's class based, right? So it lands exactly Overwatch meets Web3. It lands somewhere in between Overwatch and Valorant. I guess a really good proxy to start understanding what we're building. And this is potentially the most optimized mobile shooter game ever built, I'd say. Compared to any other shooter in the market, this game will run on absolutely anything. It is hyper optimized. Everything about it is done to be able to broach and kind of appeal to a mass market audience, right? So everything from the control scheme, right? How seamless it is and how easy and not cluttered compared to the market, right? To the tech specs, right? How it's running on like 200 megabytes, right? Today, which is unheard of for any other kind of like top shooter game in the market, right? To just the kind of like sort of game design principles, right? We want to make a very clean experience. I think this is part of the bet here that a lot of these shooters, specifically when they transition to mobile, they lose a lot of the sensibility for the platform, right? And so I think we saw that very much with the last major shooter coming to mobile, which was Apex, right? It was a very complex game trying to maintain the kind of HD fidelity to the flagship product, but that couldn't get it to perform as well on mobile, right? So we learned from all of those other products, and we're truly building something that is as native as you can go for mobile, right? So the economy, the design, the philosophy is all structured around like really knowing the player profile and sort of being able to sympathize with that user. So this is, I think, the high level of what we're building. We have some fun kind of design innovation built into the product that we're excited to test out. Particularly, we didn't want to just do sort of a copy pasta of like Valorant, right? We felt that was very creatively sort of limiting. So we went with a very similar sort of aesthetic and theme, right? It is a sci-fi shooter after all. But we decided to take more creative risk on the modes, right? So we don't have the same kind of search and destroy that's been overplayed with CS and Val. We have a mode that kind of is a remix of all the staples of shooter, right? That integrates elements of TDM, elements of capture the flag, of domination, right? It's something that is very new and fresh, yet feels familiar, right? So any shooter player can jump in, uh, queue for a quick match, and be able to play, understanding what's going on, but also sort of learning how to master the tactics involved in playing the objective in this game. And yeah, I think that's what I want to say at this point. Obviously, we haven't released much information yet. We're keeping a lot of alpha here behind closed doors. We are working on a website that should be coming out over the next month. I can also do maybe a quick sneak peek of that at some point today, but it's looking fantastic. I think our designers and developers are killing it, and yeah, there should be the next major kind of like product release that will include a lot of like the art and the information about the game here in a more fleshed out way.
Love it, man, and I love also the community's reaction. The art looks amazing, and yeah, like as Joao notes, that is a fully playable character. Like I actually use her quite a bit in the game. I'm a fan of a few other characters there. There's a couple other sniper characters. There's a cool toxic character. Zhao's got a lot of stuff cooking, and I think this is the nice part about this is that you're going to see this kind of all kind of layer up in a very healthy way, right? And you're going to see this is kind of the expectation you want for projects, right? Because right, Zhao doesn't need your mint funds. Zhao wants loyalty, right? Jungle wants loyalty. The jungle calls for you because the opportunity here is to build something that is deeply valuable, right? And more importantly, deeply connected, right? And Zhao noted this a little earlier, right? The ability is like, yo, you can launch this stuff and you could have 350, 365 people, right? We got more people, one per day at the moment right now, who are already here just hearing about this. And it's just a amazing, amazing opportunity to build that loyalty into this product experience. And, Zhao's been, it's going to be really cool when you guys realize how he's building his Genesis system and his, this curation system of quality gamers, because Zhao wants two different types of users as well, right? Which is really cool. Zhao wants, of course, Web3 native collectors who believe in this vision and believe in their long term execution. But what he also really wants is, Web2 gamers that are already interested in Web3, right? And, if you've been playing Call of Duty, Valorant, any of the other shooters out there in the marketplace, right? You could see some really cool opportunities of where Zhao's going to have an opportunity and Jungle's going to have an opportunity with this product in this game. So, Zhao, I mean, Zhao, you could also ask me any questions in the future. You could always ask me anything. I know I've been grilling you with stuff. I'm kind of curious now, and, as we kind of wrap up here in the next 10, 15 minutes, what's the next big hurdle for you, or what are you thinking about right now? Like, I mean, clearly you got to get the game ready. You got to get the mint ready. Those are all kind of clear. Are there any other things that are on top of your mind, or curious if you have any thoughts, questions that you look out to the market space that you'd love to get answers or feedback to from my end? More than happy to also switch the conversation around to you.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of what I've been digging into over the last week was just these fun experiments with rodents, right? Hamster racing, rat roulette. That seems to be quite organic, like PMF and that kind of like gambling meta with these like very kind of like scrappy projects that kind of uh, went onto the timeline and made a big splash. Curious how you're sort of taking that in, exactly, running hamster races. How do you think about that? I think this is a very kind of like different way to approach the market, which is like, look, let's build directly where kind of like incentive is aligned, and let's like be very kind of raw and kind of naked about the approach, right? Go directly for it. Where do you see that kind of like that type of project, right? And particularly you see this on a barbell, right? You have these like very like scrappy like hamster projects, but you also have Rollbit, right? Doing like over a bill, I think, in estimated revenue for the year. So how do you see that gambling impulse and kind of these like on-chain casinos building out? Where do they go from here?
Um, I love it because the overlap of degen gamblers, right, from you know FanDuel, DraftKings, and like all these other gambling websites is a one-to-one overlap, right, to exactly what crypto degens are doing with NFTs. So like I see that consumer profile be perfect. I get sad though because I'm a stupid US based company, right? Like to be very honest, like if I lived in a region and I felt that I had enough legal safeguard, bro, I would fucking dress up as the hamster and do the races myself, right? Like I straight up would, right? And that's like kind of the insane thing here, right? Because in a weird way, what a lot of people don't realize is that's the market I actually kind of want to get to. And this was actually already started. If you think about the first thing that really was really successful in Web3 it was, you know, Zed Run was one of the first most successful games in Web3. It was really them and Axie in the very early days. And what is Zed Run? Zed Run was a total black box degen racing betting system. And where was that really inspired from? Japan. Japan is crazy and Asia is crazy. They've been betting on horse racing games, virtual games forever. There's even a game in Japan where the horses are actually girls and they run like horses. It's very strange, like anime girls, and they run, and it literally has some of the highest betting volume you'll ever see, which is so crazy, right? Like it's like I can't even explain how weird the art style is, but it blows their mind. So you know. Like the little alpha I can leak here is Fury is designed to be this. Our car racing game is designed to be that vertical. The problem that I'm running into is that where is the line of just straight degen bets, right? Versus like gamification with some degen betting. Like what does that relationship look like? And that's the hard part to like get legal compliance on, right? Because like the hamster racing guys are straight up doing illegal ass shit, but it's probably like three bros who don't know what they're doing, hence why they were recording races and putting them on replay because they ran out of content because it got too big, right? But like they don't have to play with the repercussions. Rollbit, on the other hand, so smart that they went and incorporated and did this. And like, dude, I was like literally thinking about this myself because I have a lot of experience with gambling licenses, and you know I've consulted and advised with a lot of top tier casinos. So I do love what it is, but here's the honest truth: because I'm not in it, I hate it. I hate it with all my spite because you know what these products all do is then there's it's no longer about any utility. It's straight up about how do we just flip coins, right? Like straight up, that's what all these people just want is like another coin flipping simulator that has enough of an interesting narrative to keep their attention for 5-10 minutes. That's it. So it bothers me quite a bit because then it's like why do we even try this? Right? Like, why do we even try hard to build a product and game experience? Right? Like, why not just shit out one of these awful things? I mean, right, we've seen multiple variations of this, right? The prior variation of this was marble racing, right? Marbles were huge in Web3, and people would fucking watch 3D simulators or Rube Goldberg physical simulators to see which marble would get down the end, and they'd bet on it. Fucking dumbest thing I've ever seen, but it was an entertaining 10 minutes. And what are we just turning everything into? It's just lottery with extra steps, right? Lottery as extra steps becomes really interesting. So that's kind of where I'm at. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Joe. Curious to hear your
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think this is the kind of like alpha or opportunity here in the space, right? Which is like really considering the degen as another player archetype that has been underserved up until this point, right? The fact that we all kind of like found it was funny and kind of like humorous to like bet on hamsters in a really like low product quality experience, right? I think says something, which is like, look, there is potentially a big market here that you could innovate a lot on. And there is an overlap between sort of game design and sort of casino design and gambling sort of economics that is very stale, right? And this is where kind of like a lot of like activity is just probably not being optimized, right? A lot of the builders there are just like you see, it's a lot of third party casino developers, and then Robit is just pulling from their SDK like the actual games, right? But the entertainment value of these is super low, right? So if we understand kind of this to be like a whole new product space of like financialized entertainment, right? And like real money gaming and betting, wagering, to what extent is that a market that is sort of missing its own kind of like major players, right? Is Robit kind of like the end game for like on-chain casinos? I don't know. I think they've kind of proven that there is a massive market there, and you can see that like the competition drop off is like massive after, right? So yeah, I think it's just like open up my eyes to like a big kind of like part of the industry that we don't talk often about, right? But is definitely there, and I was joking with someone earlier today that like a lot of PFP communities are just gambling guilds, right? You're there kind of like holding the bag together and kind of hoping that, number go up, price goes to eternity. It is just a different way to structure the game, but it's the same kind of like driver underneath the surface, right? So I I think it's like, the memes of the hamsters are pretty funny, but it's definitely deeper than just like that like surface area kind of like uh sort of like bizarre kind of like product experience. It's just like there's something that is tapping into that a lot of people are not building towards that market, right? So yeah, just curious like on where this goes from here.
Yeah, and I think it's just oh, sorry. Yeah, I think it's just this bigger issue, right? And you're exactly right. There's a positive takeaway here. There is a very clear product experience that is okay to be lightweight as long as it's giving heavy returns, right, or heavy potential for returns, right? But that's like honestly true with all NFTs, right? Like, dude, some of the shittiest art in NFTs, right, can run as long as there's this belief and expected value on the back end of that, right? And we see this all the time with a lot of different collections too. And that's also like a very important part of the design is you do need to create some type of degen like gambling play in everything you build to a certain extent or understand that design factor, right? So, there should be something where people could roll to either double down on a bet or lose it all, right? Like you should take those mechanics from traditional gambling based systems, right? That is creating different outputs of yield, right? And this is kind of where you could see small systems like, Valhalla's reroll system, right? Like, wouldn't it be interesting where they went even one step further, where it was like reroll, you either get a legendary trait or your NFT is burned, right? Like who would play with that? You turn a deflationary supply, right? And you turn in this crazy system where people might be willing to gamble with rares and it would just eat up all the floors in that system potentially to create a balance out of that, which is really cool. Like no one thinks through systems like this to a certain extent, but if you do that right, it could be really positive. So this is where I really want to see the market actually get way more mature, because if they could start looking at those game mechanics, they could at least start bringing them in, right? And Tribe actually has two gambling like plays. And they're not gambling systems by any means, but they are leveraging gambling based social incentives, right? And that is Fury, has that as a racing simulator game, which I think will be really cool when it fully comes out. I think the other one that we have that we really want to go after is honestly the sports arena, right? I mean, So Rare is doing the exact same thing that we're talking about with Rollbit, and they're just doing it with like digital trading cards and licensing. And that shit just as degenerate as everything else, right? It's just fantasy sports, right, with economic money to it, which is no different than DraftKings and FanDuel. And the hilarious part is So Rare barely added anything to that loop. All they added was like, oh, you could only have 5 of these guys to field on your team, and then you go into these tournament structures. That was it. It's a super simple product experience, right? And honestly, the product hasn't evolved. The only thing that So Rare's really evolved in their product in a meaningful way has been more licensing partnerships. They're just bringing in the IP. So that's the thing that's So Rare hacked, is like, how do you bring IP? And that's why fantasy sports is actually one of the more interesting areas that I would want to get into, because it already has loyalty built in, right? Loyalty to players, loyalty to teams, loyalty to that structure, especially when you're looking at say like March Madness and stuff. So it definitely is something that's really interesting. But this also then is the sad part about the whole industry. We only care about gains. There's nothing else, right? We only care about gains. And if that's the case, right, then the products that are going to win are the ones that give the most gains. And what are we doing? We're just replicating our Web2 society again with new structures, right? Where the new casinos are Rollbit, right? The new DraftKings are So Rare, right? The new, hey, like scratcher lottery based systems are NFTs. uh None of that's exciting, man. Like I really want to see something more. and maybe I'm the naive one here, and I might be the naive one, to be very honest. It's like, do I actually believe Web3 is going to deliver something differentiated that's better for society? Or are we just going to allow a transfer of wealth from these existing Web2 systems to whoever does it first in Web3? And I hope it's not that in the latter, but it is leading to that potentially being the case.
Yeah, I think that potential scenario is at play, right? And this is like when we'll know like if the let's say revolution failed and got co-opted, right? But to your point, like a lot of the sort of when I look at Robit, I see like this anonymous sort of organization, very faceless behind the scenes, which has this like sheer of like legitimacy, but you can tell kind of like isn't sort of native to the space and part of the culture, right? And I think that's a real shame. I see the sparks of like culture here way more and this like hamsters.gg and like Harry Potter, Sonic, like Obama. I forget the full kind of like project title, but the new kind of like fake Bitcoin, new Bitcoin 2.0 project. I think that's where kind of like that speculative frenzy and that's like exactly there we go. I could be Harry Potter, Obama, Sonic, 10, Inu. That's legit. So this is just producing native new culture, a new scene, right? That is really built for the users in this market, right? I love it. I was just in their website last night ordering some merch here. So it is these kind of like experiments where I get very excited for what we're building, right? Because it really is going in on a direction of its own, right? And on the point about gambling, I think there's a massive like PR kind of like bad rap that it gets, right? I think if you just take out the taboo out of the equation, right? And you don't think through your kind of like precondition lens of like, oh, gambling equals bad, right? You see it's just an activity, right? That like you're participating with like the expectation of positive EV, right? You have your money that you're sort of happy to part with for the expectation of more, right? Like um, that should be your right, right? Like this shouldn't be a contentious issue, right? Like the fact that like, builders are prevented from like regulatory reasons from actually building fun casinos and fun kind of gambling activities on chain because of like legal entity setup is just like a massive like sort of missed opportunity, right? So I'm very excited for that, this kind of like unfeathered building for the space for you know net novel, net new kind of like experiences that we can't even imagine today, right? And we're exploring parts of that, I think, with 4Game, right? I think we might have, and this is some alpha as well, we might have some degen mode at some point to kind of like get closer to that overlap. But really, like what excites me as a builder is like when things really start approaching very different than the market that we know as like Web 2 or kind of like traditional gaming, right? And I think the reason why I bring up this question and like I led into this direction is because these are the novel kind of weird niche experiments that potentially show a sign for what's to come.
100%. And that's kind of why it's still so exciting to be in this market and see everything new come to this market as well. I think there's still a lot for us to learn, a lot for us to grow, lots for us to build. And I think that's all like incredibly bullish here in this market overall. It's also bullish to see, 400 plus people. That's why I just took a screenshot. Awesome to see that kind of engagement here and just being able to learn and share this kind of story. Joao, I know we're a little bit over time here, and I think we're actually supposed to like talk. I don't know if you're still up for talking or if you want to extend this. I kind of want to defer to you. What would you prefer? Do you want to kind of wrap this up and then us go to a one-on-one call? What do you need from me right now?
Yeah, I had set up the time here, the block in the calendar. Happy to take a few audience questions if there are any. You guys can feel free to send it over in the chat and I'll read it. But yeah, we can give like a few more minutes and then wrap it.
Yeah, sounds good. So if you guys have questions, feel free to drop it in here. We'll add it in. So, Zhao, as you have brought this to the fold, what do you think the next 30 days looks like for you here at the moment right now? It looks like it's probably, your focus now to start going public with this. I know you're still putting all the fine-tuned details on the mint and on the product experience. But walk us through, what can we expect over the next 30 days from what you guys are building here as well, for your product and your experience too.
Yeah, for sure. So over the next 30 days, we're going to be coming out with way more information about the ecosystem, the game, and everything we're doing on the community and product side. So it's been definitely fun kind of leading up to this point, seeing just people imagine and guess at the mystery. But we now want to be able to kind of provide more information for what we're actually doing. So that's when I mentioned sort of the website being developed for the game, and then we'll be able to also share more about the on-chain kind of ecosystem that we're building, right? So that's what is coming up in the pipeline. We're also going to have the game fully ready to play test over the next month. So that's also pretty exciting to see, and I'll be able to share more when we have that. And just jumping over into questions here. Love that the the first one was, Joao, you got a girlfriend? Not right now. No, I'm very sort of married to Jungle, and very happy to be building solo and not have any other commitments in my life at this point. I think it takes all in kind of attitude to really do it to the max extent possible. And so yeah, I've kind of shut myself off from social life, let's say. So somebody asked for feed pics. So yeah, no, that won't be happening today. Maybe at some other point. Are you building the storyline for the gaming characters of the community? Yes. So this is pretty exciting. I released some character lore to some community members that kind of expanded on that. But each character has a fleshed out lore, and the whole game is premised on this universe that has a really interesting thread line, and maybe that's a whole separate kind of conversation that I can open up in a future call. But yeah, we've definitely been very conscious of building it in a cohesive kind of like game universe where each character plays their own role. There are factions in this universe. There is a setting of like a war that happened. It's very built out for like a mobile game. So very excited to have that kind of like narrative backbone behind the game. When will the tourney start for the game? This is coming over the next few months. Again, this is very relative to two things, right? So one is just development journey, and then the other is market conditions, right? So when we announce the mint for the factory for the Jungle Seed, you'll know that like the tournament is ready, and will be coming out shortly after. So yeah, let's see. Any other questions here, Nick, that you kind of spotted? Yeah,
Oh
so
man, I mean, they really just want feet pics. That's like half the conversation. It feels like. I think the big thing for you guys to understand, I think, looks like the questions they're asking is also understanding the structure of your mint. And I think, Zhao, that'll probably be one of the things that will be good for your narrative as you come out to the market here in August. Is I think what people don't realize, which I think is great, is that a lot of these people think they're getting game characters first. What they don't realize is like, no, there's like a Genesis asset at the top that will potentially yield game characters, right? Or yield the opportunity to have, the more of the character art that you want. So, I think that's going to be the big thing here. I know a lot of people are kind of curious on what that will be. So that'll probably be a good takeaway for you as you lean in, because this factory like model that we've been talking about here as well is going to be, I think, really relevant to what you're building. And also, I think that's the reason why I'm so bullish on Zhao, is that his mint is going to be so different than all the other mints. He's not minting you like a gun to start, right? Or some like garbage 3D character to start, right? He's going to be walking you guys through a total product experience that is about conviction and loyalty, right? That's how these assets are designed. And if he gets that right, I think you guys are going to see a lot of good value behind that as well.
yeah, for sure. And the most bullish thing that I can tell, like very high level, is that all of the assets are being done, are game agnostic, right? They're done at the publisher level, at the jungle level, so that you're going to see utility and interoperability across games that we publish, right? So always like remembering that jungle is a much bigger play than any one single game. And though like we're hyper bullish on the first game for the win, more is coming down the pipeline, right? And the assets that you get now in this mint will be able to carry over to other experiences, other products, and other games, right? So this is a whole new sort of design sort of space that we opened up. And we've essentially created a new layer to tokenize assets at the company, at the holding company level, right? Which is pretty exciting. It's something that I haven't seen in this space and opens up a whole new kind of like possibility space for us to play around with. So we're not kind of sort of committed to any one kind of product experience that inevitably will have a limited life cycle. This is again going back to the point about long-term conviction. We want to be able to incentivize people to come with us for the long term, right? To be with Jungle for years to come, right? And see all of the games that we develop and build and ship, and see kind of like their sort of exposure as holders as kind of prioritized just as much as anything else.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, that's like the realist alpha. Most people don't really understand is that, the way that this is being built is Jungle is trying to operate truly as a publisher, right? So their goal is not just to launch one game and scale that out. It's actually the ability to potentially launch multiple games. Again, those are multi-year time horizons you want to look at, but that's actually what this product experience is built for, which I think is really exciting, right? And this is kind of why people don't realize how this product experience is being scaled. Is that every first person shooter game is only scaling into by building the assets for that world. Total wrong design, right? Total limited to design. And Zhao's essentially sharing that there's a counterplay here. And people don't understand that, right? And this is kind of where, again, a lot of people don't recognize where this is going to be. It's so easy to typecast, a certain experience. But again, that's actually what kills this, Web3, right, in this market quite a bit. It's these people who are trying to assume a certain outcome, but I think what Jungle is trying to do is a totally different business model. And then just realize Jungle raised $6 million 4 weeks after FTX. That's pretty insane if you think about that, right? Like, it is a incredibly healthy seed round after one of the world's worst events in Web3 when all VCs disappeared, right? This is kind of a very outlier outcome. And there are a handful of startups that were able to raise during that window, but it's very hard for consumer startups to raise in that window. And I think the conviction in what Zhao's round, and Zhao's fundraise is the fact that he's not reliant on a single game working, right? And this is also something that we at Tribe are really focused on here, right? And this is kind of where all this thing it becomes really powerful and very valuable here, is that you're going to be able to see this market, evaluate and see a new design paradigm come in, because Zhao is trying to build for an enduring vision here, which I think is pretty exciting. Well, Zhao, I know we're well over time. I want to maybe give you back the floor to see if there's anything else you want to share with the community before we wrap up. But this has been a fantastic conversation today, and really appreciate your time.
No, thank you. And just to close, I think to touch on that point about the adverse kind of like market conditions, right? I think we joke that like Web3 is an adversarial kind of like environment, and definitely the moment in time when we started Jungle, we felt that from the get-go, right? And I think we already have that as part of the core DNA of the company. And just took a screenshot here of like what we actually show to every single employee as part of like the onboarding process, which is this line here that the conditions are always impossible, right? The possible has already been done. Now we go for the impossible, right? My thesis here is that um, we need to be anti-fragile, right? We need to be able to operate in any market condition. And this is when you can tell a good player, right? That they operate and they perform independent of scenario, right? The external conditions aren't a factor, right? This is what we're trying to do. And It's everything from design to like the core cultural DNA of the company. So right on.
Amazing, man. Well, I appreciate you sharing your journey. Appreciate getting a first look at what you're doing here for everyone in our community. I hope you guys can see the value of why we're excited for Jungle, of course, being our next village partner here, but also very similarly seeing just the independent vision. And this is what I also love, right? Because as you guys know, um, we don't care at Tribe if you're spending time here or if you're spending time at one of our tribe partners. That is just as good. So again, if jungle is something that really aligns with what you're doing, and especially if you're an active mobile gaming player, stay tuned for what jungle is about to do. You're going to see a really cool way of allocation. You're going to see a really cool way for all these different opportunities to come in. There's some really cool upside here in the design and the structure. And again, we're going to continue to bring more of these companies to you guys in this structure. We actually have a couple more village partners in the pipeline, and our goal is at least every season is to minimally do one, right? Launch. We hope to increase that. The honest truth is, it's hard to find good quality in this bear market, right? But we're very thankful to have someone like Joao. Incredibly thankful for us to have what we had with Dimensionals and Sosh. We're going to continue to kind of keep that, and we're going to keep our track record high, right? Like this is kind of where this is all going to be a huge opportunity for our vision and our market here as well. So let's go do our favorite thing real quick and head to the secret chamber so you guys get a little bit of your upside here as well. This one is going to be, I think I call this Enter the Jungle. Is that what I call this? Yeah, nice. Okay. And let me get you guys a nice password here. Alrighty then. What is the password? The password is. Oh no. Oh my bad. I sent the wrong one. 36 seconds. Okay. Password is 43823. The password is 43823.